Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Light Sports Ramble. I am Troy Otradovic, as always, joined with Evan Watallison. Evan, today is the last series of our Packer grades, and we're going to finish it up with the special teams. So it's going to be a good episode today. How are things out in lovely Wisconsin?
Well, it's almost beach weather here. You know, it's a very balmy 29 degrees. If I didn't have to wear, dress pants to work every day, I would have busted out the shorts and wore those to work. It was, I could have went to the beach for the day. It was that kind of day. It did snow a little bit, but hey, after it's been, wind chill, with the wind chill factored in, negative 45 below, zero, and negative 30 below zero the past previous few days, 28 degrees feels like beach weather.
Yeah, we got, you guys almost caught us. I didn't check the official temperature today, but it was supposed to be a high of 30. So you guys may have caught us. That's pretty rare. But man, it was like, I left for work and the thermometer in my truck said 5 degrees and it felt warm. It felt a lot warmer than that because the wind wasn't blowing when I left. So like you, I thought it was a nice spring day. But at the end of the day, it's still darn cold out there, bud. But
see, when I got in my car yesterday, the thermometer in my car said negative 12. When I got in my car this morning, it was positive 18.
Nice. That's huge. That is a huge turnaround. So we got a great show for the listeners tonight, special teams, and we broke it down. I'll kind of go over a little bit how we're going to do it. We broke it down into special teams. We broke it down into return team, coverage team. Then we're also going to talk about the individual special teams kicker, Mason Crosby, Tim Masthay, talk about their season a little bit. But I think we're going to spend the most time, Evan, on the special teams unit itself, talk about some of the individuals in the return game, some of the individuals on the coverage team. So let's start out with the actual return team on special teams, which really wasn't that bad. When I did the research and got the stats, and I'd thrown this out for you, individually, Micah Hyde finished the year 14th in the league with 24.1 average. As a team, though, they finished at 20.3 because of a couple players, and we'll talk about those players that made bad choices in the end zone. And then on punt returns, Micah Hyde was actually 5th in the league at 12.3. Overall as a team, 11.3 with one touchdown, which was Micah Hyde's 93-yard return. But let's just start as a whole in the return game. It started off with Jeremy Ross. And let's just go through how
we have to say that name.
Well, we do because every time we cut someone, they go somewhere else and do good. But let's talk about the beginning of that season when we had Jeremy Ross in there. There's not much to say, but you know what happened. You can take over and kind of go through the progression of returners, and then we'll talk about him.
Yeah, well, if Jeremy Ross, unfortunately, in Green Bay, I think he just needed to change the scenery, and the change of scenery did him well. He was very indecisive on when to take out of the end zone and when not to, and he had, costly turnovers too, both in the playoff game the year prior, and then I believe that opening day against San Francisco, I think he had a turnover that game too, or he just gave us really poor field position late in the fourth quarter. It was one of those two things. It escapes my mind right at the moment. But he did not do well at all against San Francisco, and he just didn't do well until we got rid of him. How many games did he end up playing for Green Bay this year?
I don't know how many games, but he only had 6 returns, and this is what I was telling you.
Yeah, so he obviously only played probably a couple games before they finally released him.
Well, they released.
He just wasn't cut out for Green Bay.
Yeah, well, they released him after Cincinnati when he had the fumble, and
so 3 games. He played 3 games.
6 returns, and this is what's really amazing: 75 yards. He had a 12.5 kickoff return average. Micah Hyde had the same average on punt returns.
And on kickoffs, that's just really horrible because majority of kickoffs in the NFL today, since they're kicking the ball from the 35 now, are going, at least 5 yards deep in the end zone. So if he's only getting about 12 yards, you said 12?
12
yards per return.
12 and a half.
He's putting the ball inside the 15-yard line most of the time. And that's just not good enough. And then James Franklin got the job, I believe, right after he did, and Franklin did horrible, too. He was very indecisive, very unsure of himself, and Franklin's one I'm going to be willing to re-examine in that position in the future because he's very good in space. He's very good in the open field. And, Cobb, I think, got a couple returns?
No, he only had one for 10.
So one return on kickoff, and he only had, 3 or 4 punts?
Yeah, three punt returns, 7.7 yard average. So
and then the Packers really found a hidden gem in Micah Hyde on special teams. I don't think that's what they were expecting when they put him back there, but what Hyde was doing really well when he first went back there was getting north and south, and that was the key. Jeremy Ross tried going east and west all the time. Ross put his head down and ran straight ahead. That's what he did really well, and there was a number of games against Pittsburgh stands out that he had a really long kickoff return that, if it wasn't for Matt Flynn missing his read, the Packers would have tied that game and sent it to overtime. And it was Jeremy Ross's return that set that up. Not Jeremy Ross.
Micah.
Now you got me thinking.
Holy cow, dude.
Micah Hyde's return that got that set up.
Holy cow. Jeez. Don't.
Yeah, and then in Dallas, he had a pump. Go ahead.
I was going to say, what have you been? You've been tipping the bottle with the crazy lady, or what? I mean,
not yet.
Come on, Jeremy Ross.
But Micah Hyde, he had a punt return against Dallas that helped turn the tide in that game, and then obviously we all know in Minnesota he had a punt return for touchdown, which is like a 90-yard return, if I'm not mistaken. So the Packers found a hidden gem in Micah Hyde on special teams. Now, I prefer him personally on punts than I do kickoffs because I think he's a little better there. And, yeah, he had a pretty decent average on kickoffs, but I just think he's more dangerous on punt returns. But we'll see if they keep him back there when the season starts. But hopefully, my one concern with Hyde is if he's going to become, very important to the defense, that they can't afford to risk injury like Randall Cobb is right now back there. Like, they can't afford to risk injury to Cobb.
Yeah, they really.
That's just my 2 cents on the return units.
Well,
or I should say the returners.
Yeah, on the returners, I'm with you. Hyde did a. If I was grading Hyde on kick returns, I'd give him a C. Yeah, he did break the big 70-yarder against Pittsburgh, and that was his long of the year. But other than that, he got it out of the end zone, made good decisions. Like you said, he was quick, goes north and south. I like that. On kickoffs, you have to be a little more elusive. I don't think Micah Hyde is that elusive guy that's always going to break that 70-yarder. I think what happened on that 70-yarder is our special teams finally blocked it up, gave him a hole, and he hit the hole hard and fast. And that's not going to happen every time. But on punt returns, there's a couple of things other than just a 12.3 average that I like about Micah Hyde. I don't recall, maybe once or twice, that he made a poor decision to take a fair catch. And I think you know what I'm talking about here. How many times do we watch a game when the guy fair catches it when the defender's 8 yards away from him? And you're like, why did you fair catch that?
Yeah.
Micah Hyde was very good at his awareness of where the defenders were. He had 14 fair catches. But what I like is he was very smart with that back there, and there's not a lot of times where I question his fair catches. You're gonna add something.
Yeah, I was going to say there was a couple of times later in the year that I think he called for the fair catch when he didn't have to. But overall, I think you're right. He didn't make poor decisions with that.
And so I really like that about him back there. And I would honestly be okay if he was the punt returner next year. I don't know which way they're going to go. Randall Cobb, I mean, we all know Randall Cobb is a special player. But do we want him returning kicks to get hurt? I don't know. I like your assessment about Jonathan Franklin. I think that he could be a very good kickoff returner because of what I was saying that Micah Hyde lacks, and that's that elusiveness on the kickoff. Now, my problem with Franklin is, though, he's got to, when he makes a decision, he's got to go with it. He cannot think twice about what he's going to do with the ball, and then he's got to go forward, and he's got to do it quick. That was the problem, like you said. I mean, it just looked, when he touched the ball, it looked like he was hesitating and looking for the perfect lane. And you just got to go and be a little elusive, break a few tackles, but I think he can do that in the long run. So we'll see what happens. We don't know what they're going to draft. They might get a guy that is a good returner in the draft. I don't know. But let's move over to the coverage. And this is where I have my problem on special teams. But I was telling you before the show, I was surprised when I looked at the stats because they weren't that terrible. We only gave up one touchdown return, but it seemed like we gave up a lot more than that because we gave up a lot of returns. But that was my surprise. Now, the averages are pretty crappy. On kickoffs, we gave up 26 yards a kickoff, which is the highest in Packer history since 1948. I thought that was pretty surprising. On punt returns, we gave up 13.1 yards, and that was the highest since 1989. So, we were giving up the initial yards, and we both know the problem with that is the change in field position. When you give up the long return, you give up field position. And I'll bring back the guy that was a Packer for a few short games, Jeremy Ross. He had a great return game against the Packers, go figure. But he changed the field position. The coverage units, and we've talked about it over and over defensively, and it led to special teams. And I know you have a kind of a reason why special teams seemed to get a little bit worse as the year went on. But it's the same thing on special teams. The gap responsibility and discipline was just not there, and we were getting blocked up. Other teams were blocking us. One guy misses his lane, and boom, the guy's got a 20-yard punt return. Or the guy's got a 50-yard punt return. It was crazy. So that's all I have to say about the coverage. What do you have to say about the coverage units? I know you got a couple guys you want to talk about also.
Yeah, well, what I would be very curious to look at, they ended the season very poor on covering kicks and punts. I would be very curious to see during the first quarter of the season, I would be very curious to see where they were in regards to coverage and stopping, and cut returns, kick returns, like stopping those. The beginning of the year, I thought they did fairly well. Now, unfortunately, just like it seems to be a broken record, and this is something I hope the Packers can figure out, injuries start striking. You have Jamari Latimer, who is a special team standout, but when Brad Jones gets hurt, Latimer's got to play more on defense. So they got to take him off punt coverage and kick coverage unit, and they got to plug somebody else in there he's not quite that good enough. Sam Barrington, who did pretty well on special teams, I believe he got banged up. Ryan Taylor, I believe, missed a couple games, and he's he's a special team stud. Which I have a drinking game that I think we should use with him. Anytime he gets in a pushing and shoving match, you got to take a shot because he seems to get into a handful every game.
Well, dude, I hope we're doing that.
When guys start getting,
I said I hope we're doing that at my house, so I don't have to drive then. Because I
do advise doing that at your house.
I'd be falling off my rocker if I had to do a shot every time that happened.
Yeah, but Devon House, he started struggling late in the year in covering punts and kicks, especially punts. There's numerous times that first guy made a miss, and that's really what punt returns are. If you can make that first initial guy miss, you're very likely getting at least 8 to 12 yards on that return if you can make that initial guy miss. Because by the time the other guys get there to make the tackle, you already have, probably about 6 or 7 yards. But when you start piling on all the injuries the Packers had at linebacker, at tight end, at other positions, you start putting guys in positions that they're not used to doing, and that's when I noticed the coverage unit started struggling. Now, with everyone healthy, we'll see what the coverage units look like. But, yeah, it wasn't a good season at all in coverage units. I was at the Pittsburgh game, and there was numerous times there that the Packers gave up mighty yards in field position. But, the San Francisco game, for instance, though, I thought they did pretty well in covering the punts and the kickoffs. But we'll see where it goes from there. If I had to grade the unit, I'd give it a D. But based off what they did early in the year, that's why I'm going to give it a D. But hopefully when you have guys healthy, when guys are doing jobs they're comfortable doing, hopefully it gets better next year.
Yeah, I'm with you. When we look at an overall grade, I give it a D for the special teams returning and coverage. I'm not, and when I'm doing that grade, I'm not putting Crosby and Masthay in there. I've got individual grades for those two. But the unit together, like you said, there was a lot of injuries, a lot of mixing and matching, and I think special teams is overlooked a lot. But it's very important.
It is.
It's so important for field position to maintain it or to get it back. And I thought the return game did it okay to try and get some of it back. But our coverage team, like you said, it goes back to another broken record word, is inconsistent. Sometimes they did well, sometimes they didn't do so well. And I think what they need is they need a good, cohesive unit that can play together. It used to be, if you remember back.
Be healthy.
Yeah, and be healthy. Go figure. Healthy and Packers don't go together, bud. It hasn't for a few years now. But if you think back to kind of maybe even the early 90s, late 80s, special teams were for those guys that they just threw them on there to go play because they needed somebody to go tackle. Now you have special team specialists. Guys that are just going to be good special teams players, and they do really well there.
So your Travis Jervis.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yep. Only another name from the past.
I totally forgot about Mr. Jervy. I liked him. He was a good, hard-nosed guy.
Yeah, that's Steve Tasker in Buffalo.
Yeah, and so, there's nothing wrong with having one or two or even three of those guys that are just going to be good special teams players on your team. There's nothing wrong with that because you need to have a good, solid special teams unit. They always talk about winning 3 phases of the game. And so you got to win in offense, you got to win on defense, and then they talk about special teams. And if you're just going to throw a makeshift group together and go out there and cover and return kicks, your unit's not going to be that good. And I think at times that's what the Packers got to, is that special teams unit was just a makeshift unit, and guys were getting 1 week to practice, maybe even 2 days to practice it, and it showed on game day in that coverage unit. So let's go into something more positive, though. I really want to talk about Mason Crosby, the kid that everybody wanted his head in 2012, came back in 2013. He knocked in 33 to 37 field goals. It was actually his best percentage in his career, 89%, 89.2 to be exact. The thing I really like, though, Evan, about Crosby this year, inside of 40 yards, 22 out of 22. Anything inside of 40, he was automatic, and he punched it through. I was really proud to see the comeback that he made because he did struggle mightily in 2012. And so he should be thanking Mike McCarthy for giving him another shot, and he proved himself. He went out there, and he did his job. In the beginning of the year, I was still nervous because I didn't know if the old Crosby was going to return. But over the year, pretty consistent. And from 50 yards, he was 5 of 7. So I can't complain about Crosby and the effort that he gave on the kicking game. What do you think about Crosby's play this year, bud?
I was quite happy with Crosby. I had my apprehensions about him too, and I know you did as well early on, because there was a lot of mention in the recaps of Crosby. But I was a little nervous early on. But he has himself to thank too, because when the Packers approached him to restructure his contract to make it a little more cap friendly and make it very incentive based, he could have said no.
You could have.
And if he would have said no, my guess is the other guy that I forget his name off the top of my head, but they had him in for training camp. My guess is he gets the job. So I think Crosby ended up keeping the job due to having the stronger leg, because for some reason the Packers have to kick a lot of long field goals. This year they didn't have to so much, and they only attempted 7 from beyond 50 yards. But I think his season long might have been 57, 58 yards, if I'm not mistaken.
Got the stats up, 57.
But whatever. 57, okay. How's that for off the top of my head?
That was awesome.
But he just seemed to get back whatever he was missing, and some kickers just go through that sometime. I know Ryan Longwell. He was very accurate during his time in Green Bay, but I remember a stretch during a season where he wasn't kicking very well, and people wanted his head. But Mike Sherman, sticks with him, and he turns it around, and then he ends up going to Minnesota and kicked in the friendly confines of the Humpty Dome. But, Crosby deserves a lot of credit. He stayed positive, kept working at it, and, started making the kicks this year when they mattered. And he's got a very strong leg, and I'm very happy to see what he's going to do in the year's future.
Yeah, my only thing is I wish they wouldn't have put him on to kickoffs, but I'll talk about that when we get into Masthay. So I graded out Mason Crosby at a B+. I didn't think that and how I grade. To get an A, you have to be in that, what I call kind of that elite, really in that group of top players at your position. I don't think he was quite there last year, but I do believe that he had a great year, so I gave him a B+. What did you give him for an individual grade?
I'd give him a B+ too. And then with kickoffs, you're bringing up him on kickoffs. There's no reason with his strong of a leg, he shouldn't be kicking them in the end zone every single time.
Yeah.
His leg. They should be going in the end zone. But I think the Packers, with the inconsistencies on the kickoffs into the end zone, because they were kickoff return for touchdown, that 109-yard return that the Vikings had, that was deep in the end zone. But the problem is, he kicked them into the end zone. They're usually very low, line drive, and it's a lot easier for them to find that seam. And I think they were designing to get more air under the kicks and getting them inside the 5-yard line rather than deep into the end zone. Because if you're kicking them, higher in the air, you're getting a little bit more hang time, and you're getting your special teams guys ample opportunity to get down to cover. So I think they started designing the kickoffs like that when the unit started to struggle.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. If you're going to boom that ball, you've got to have the trajectory on the ball to be able to get out of the end zone, because if it doesn't, it's like you said, it's more of a line drive, and then that return man has a running start, and he's got the vision because the ball is going to get there a lot faster than the coverage guys. And so I agree with you on that point. I just believe that I think Masthay has the leg to knock it out of the end zone every time, as does Crosby. I know that we kick in the elements and all of those things, and as it gets colder, it's harder to kick it out of the end zone. But we only had 30 touchbacks as a unit. And so, where they're kicking from, 30 is not that many. But we'll see what they do on kickoffs. Let's talk about Masthay and his punting. I'll give you the stats. Gross average, 44.6 yards. His net average, 39.0, which was 0.2 yards off of the Packers' record, Evan. The Packers' record is 39.2. But here's the thing. I had to see and go back and see who held the record and how long it's been there. This record has been in place since 1963. A guy...
Wow.
Yeah, it's by a guy named Jerry Norton in 1963.
I'm going to say Craig Hendricks, but I didn't think it went that far back.
Well, that's what I thought. I thought Hendrick would have it. But it's 39.2, and it's by Jerry Norton in 1963. And then the other stat is he put 22 balls inside the 20. He had 64 punts. About 34% of his kicks were going inside the 20. And I know you and I were talking a little bit about it. Didn't seem like he had that great of a year. But he really didn't do too bad. I graded him out at a B. I thought that he did really well with his 39 gross average. But I want you to explain to the listeners, as you were to me as we were talking before the show, why it seemed that he didn't have that great of a year after you evaluate, his performance.
Yeah, well, you actually talked me into upping his grade a little bit because I was going to go him a C because I just didn't like watching him, and I was not really thinking I was going to give him a C plus because I didn't think he had that great of a year. Looking at how many, I didn't remember a lot of kicks inside the 20. Now when you had mentioned his average, his gross, and his net, there's a stat that I remember seeing out there that the average, the Packers, when Matt Flynn, Posey, Seneca Wallace took over, the Packers didn't gain a lot of yards per possession. I think it was only like 20 yards per possession, and they averaged about two points a possession, and that's horrible. And when you're only, you're going 3 and out a lot, and you're punting from inside your 30, 35-yard line all the time, the average field position is going to be much worse for you than usual. And when you're not able to coffin corner it a lot and get it inside the 10-yard line where a lot of teams just let it go, again, you're going to have a hard time getting really strong numbers because Masthay had to punt a lot from deep in his own territory. And that, I think, had to do a lot with his numbers, and it gives a lot more opportunities for the other team to return it, especially when you got Devon House, who always seems to, miss on the first move from the other guy. So, I guess I'll give him a B. You talked me into it, giving him a B. And I just hope that the Packers are better able to flip the field position and punt the ball from around their own 40, 45-yard line rather than from their 30, 35-yard line. I would be interested to see if that stat's out there, where the average field, where their average, what yard line they're coming from, average for punts.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It seemed like a lot of their punts came from inside the 35.
Yeah, it's probably out there somewhere. And just to add to that,
90 seconds.
Gotta love the crazy lady telling us on the iPhone 90 seconds left. But if you think back,
wow, where'd time go?
Yeah, it flies, dude. I tell you, we get on the phone and these episodes are just flying by. Maybe we just like to ramble a lot. But Masthay was one of the best of putting the ball inside the 20 a few years ago. But again, it's like you said, if you move the ball and get it to the 40, 50-yard line, now he has a chance to put it inside the 20. I mean, he did really good. 34% of his kicks inside the 20 this year. So, but with that said, Bud, we're about ready to wrap it up. I will tell you, tomorrow is our Super Bowl prediction day. We're going to have Cass's uncle from the website, Your Daily Cowboys Football Fix, which we are a big contributor to. Every day we contribute our ramble to her website. We've had communication with her uncle, Mr. Al Beam, and he is going to be on the show tomorrow to talk with us about our keys to victory in the Super Bowl. With that said, Bud, anything before we let the listeners go tonight?
Don't have anything else to add right now.
Well, that sounds good, Bud. You and I will get back together, as always, tomorrow. With that said, everyone, enjoy your night. Those that are in the Midwest and the Northeast, enjoy the heat wave. We'll see you all at the next red light. Have a great night, everyone.